Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for folks to get in the room. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Allison Hurrier, and I head up the Textile Arts curriculum at Portland State University. For those of you who are joining us from outside the university today, the Textile Arts curriculum is an elective track in the BFA program that provides an interdisciplinary approach to the study of clothing and textiles. We offer courses in weaving, surface design, sewn construction, and dress history that encourage students to develop portfolios for a variety of applications in fashion, costume, textiles, and contemporary art. This is one of several events that we're hosting this term where we invite students and the public together to engage with outside perspectives that supplement our current course offerings. So if you're interested in these kinds of things, please feel free to visit our website and find out about our upcoming programming. Before I turn things over to Ayung and Annin, I would like to acknowledge that we are joining you from Portland State University, which is located near the heart of downtown Portland, Oregon in Multnomah County. We honor the indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on, the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of Chinook, and Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River Valley. It's important to acknowledge these ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. So Ayung, thank you so much for being here today. We are thrilled to have you with us. And Annin, thank you so much for inviting us into your classroom and sharing this experience with us. I'm going to let you both take it from here.
All right. Thank you, Allison, and thank you, Ayung, for being here. Really thrilled that we have this opportunity to discuss your work. First off, an introduction to Ayung's practice. Ayung Yu is an interdisciplinary artist based in New York. She received her MFA from Columbia University and BFA from Rhode Island School of Design. She has exhibited at venues including Museum of Art and Design, New York, Christie's, New York, Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts in New York, Artists Alliance in New York, Leroy Neiman Gallery, Times Square Space, the Jewish Museum, and Frederick Schnitzer Museum in Miami. I also am hearing a lot of, could we have a silent, people mute themselves? I'm hearing some background noise.
Yeah, I'm working on that right now, Annin. Thank you. Sorry about that.
It's all right. You was awarded in the Artist in the Market Fellowship by the Bronx Museum of Arts, Individual Artist Fellowship by the Mid-Atlantic Foundation of Arts, and the Gold Prize by the AHL Foundation.
I was going to go to Fred Meyer.
Also participated in artist residency.
And New Season sometimes doesn't. So
okay. Thank you.
Hi, I think it's Ann. Ann is okay. I think we got it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Artist residencies at Sculpture Space, Dongguk University, School of Visual Arts, and Catwalk Art Institute. What an interesting roster of experiences. But really, your practice is becoming very widely respected and well known, and I'm so pleased you are here today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So the way I've structured this is that I'll sort of go in depth into 3 most recently completed projects. So there are 3 performance-based films with the titles of Morning Rituals, Blood Memory, and The Passage. And so I'll start with a short video compilation clip of each of the videos. So this one is Morning Rituals. And
Sorry.
No. I think we're ready to play.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I can go into my PDF.
One moment, I'm just gonna undo the screen share. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's just a little bit of, there's a lot going on the Zoom right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. So yeah, the clip that you had just seen is from the film Morning Rituals. And so for Morning Rituals, I'm reimagining Korean ancestral funerary rites and rituals that are centered on cleansing spirits of the deceased and helping them pass on. And it felt particularly relevant because I started filming it in 2020 and just completed it earlier this year. So it was very much during the pandemic and thinking about this idea of like communal grief and communal loss. And so the film takes place in a variety of different locations that are both built inside of, so constructed site-specific inside installations / environments in my studio, as well as outside landscapes. So in this particular image, I am in a reimagined burial mound that I had built in the studio. And during the performance, I'm sort of burying my body and unearthing my body sort of in repetition. And it's this idea of thinking about grief and death as cycles of life, which is this idea of cycles and repetition is very much a philosophy and the way that a lot of these rituals think about mourning and passing on, less so thinking about like death as a final point, but rather it being sort of all circular. And I'm doing the same gesture of burying and unearthing with a garment that had belonged to my grandmother. And it's thinking about the garment as sort of like a surrogate body.
Ayun, there's like a little blue box that's in front of the
oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were seeing the whole image because it's so beautiful. So
is it okay now?
yeah, we are seeing, it looks like maybe if you wanted to go into full view.
Oh,
yeah, that might help.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the one right there.
Okay, so sorry.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I think it's fine. I think it's gonna be, yeah, I think it's great. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of the gestures that I'm thinking about, I'm also washing. So it's this idea of burying, reburying, and also cleansing. And so I'm both washing my body and also the garment, which is the image that we're seeing right now. Yeah. So then in a different sort of performance, this one takes place at the Korean demilitarized zone. So that is a strange strip of land that acts as the border between North and South Korea. And in this specific performance, I'm on a frozen river because it's we performed it in like the dead of winter. And it is a really sort of poetic river in that it flows from the mountainous regions of North Korea down to South Korea. So the water is sort of borderless and it acts as this strange connecting conduit. And so in this performance, I had set up sort of like a makeshift organic altar using ash as a primary material, and I'm putting it over my body as well. And thinking a lot about the history and the violent history of the DMZ, as of course it was the site of a lot of war and separation and trauma, and thinking about like the generational traumas that resulted from it that are still very much like echoing a lot of the culture. A lot of families are still affected. And so thinking about separations and borders, and thinking about mourning rituals. And so in the final iteration of this performance, so the garment, it's a ceremonial garment that had belonged to my mother that I had embedded with different organic materials that I had sourced from the DMZ beforehand. So there's a lot of moss, soil, a lot of like stones that I had kind of using different silicones and resins had embedded into the garments. And so in the final act, I wanted to kind of float. There was somewhat fortunately and somewhat unfortunately, the sun had come up, so parts of the river had started to crack. And so I was able to kind of float the dress into the water, which felt like a moment of release and offering. And in a different area of the DMZ, I worked with a dancer who is performing a contemporary version of the Korean folk dance, the crane dance. So the DMZ is a sort of strange place because it is a site of ongoing military tension, but it also is a thriving ecological safe haven. And there are thousands of plants and animal life that have found refuge in it. And it's currently being in the process of being recognized by UNESCO as a biosphere. And so the sort of famous and iconic symbol of the DMZ is the red-naped and white-naped cranes. So they are an endangered species. They fly in from Siberia, down to North Korea and then to South Korea, and come to South Korea to find refuge every winter. And because of the way that the land is really untouched, they thrive there. There's actually pockets of the land where it's sort of a no man's zone. Humans are not allowed in it, and it's solely to protect the cranes. And because the cranes come and go from North and South Korea, they symbolize a lot of hope for reconciliation. And so they hold a lot of cultural symbolism. And so in the dance, we filmed it at a specific time of the day. It was right before sunset, where the cranes migrate from one area to another. And so that is the cranes that you see in the background. And she's standing in an abandoned rice field where the cranes also use as feeding grounds. And in this performance, it takes place in Kauai. In Hawaii is the most recent performance location. It was also the riskiest performance that we had done, as it is a ring of fire that we had placed our dancer.
Excuse me?
Oh.
I don't know if this is anyone else, but I'm still just not seeing the other pieces. Or is that just me?
Oh, I think we're on, I want to make sure that we're looking at the image that you're referring to, Ayun. I think, is that Alejandro what you were asking about?
Oh, yeah, it's a ring.
Yeah.
Is it or are you seeing like a ring of fire and a dancer?
No, we're not. No, we are.
Oh.
Yeah, I think you might have to scroll down. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if it could be, if there is a full screen click, that would also be helpful. We're seeing the frame around it.
Okay.
There, yeah.
Well,
Well,
but
we
you're
tried,
not,
yeah, we tried that before. I think, let me see. I think it's okay if we don't see the full screen because I can still see the images okay. But I think, yeah, we'll just make sure that like we're looking at the correct slide maybe.
okay.
So we make sure, yeah, so we're seeing the Ring of Fire slide right now.
Okay, were you able to see the other images? The cranes and
No, we
the,
haven't seen that one either. No. Okay. So yeah, whatever you're doing right now, that's advancing things.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So sorry. So the crane image, so this is the image I was talking about when I was talking about the migrating red-naped and white-naped cranes, and the dancer dancing during a point where they're migrating from one area to another. Okay, and so this is the Ring of Fire. Yeah, so for this performance, we performed it on the beach right before sunset. And so the idea of circles as a sacred symbol comes up a lot in ancestral rituals. Is actually all rituals. And there's a lot of movements in this specific ritual where performers and dancers are dancing in a circle or inside of a circle. And that's something that we wanted to explore. And so our lovely dancer, Sohei Kim, who flew in from Korea, was generous enough to experiment, although it wasn't without mishap. Yeah, and then we also filmed in a taro farm. And so she performed the same ritual dance, which talks about cleansing and sending off spirits of the deceased. And in it, and so in this one, she's sort of inside of a waterbed. And so it's playing with this idea of fire and water as elements of the performance. So in this one, also on the beach, my partner and I had constructed several unfired porcelain molds of my face. They are sort of, they were created with a silicone mold and we had sort of just like taken them out. So they were still very wet on the day of filming, and it's my face in the middle, where I had also covered my face in porcelain to kind of mimic the masks. And during the performance, I slowly come out of this burial mound and I take each of these faces and I disintegrate them into the water until they just sort of are part of the water because it's clay and it's unfired. So it sort of just kind of returns back into the earth. And that again talks about the same idea of cycles of life and grief as sort of this like disintegration of self was something that I was also thinking about. This again, same performance where I had covered my body with porcelain. Yeah. And so in the final location, I'm at the Hudson Valley. It's during the artist residency of Catwalk Institute. This was right after the lockdown. So the first installation where it's inside of my studio, I had built this installation during the lockdown. So during the lockdown in New York, so from March of 2020 to April. And so the one in Hudson Valley was in like late July to early September of 2020. So it's sort of right after. And in this, I am inside of a swamp, which was an experience. But I was thinking of this swamp as this sort of like strange primordial pool of like water that's swimming with life. And in it, I'm rocking back and forth a decayed flower. And in this one, it's sort of overseeing the mountains. It was right before sunset that we had started. I had sort of built in a circular altar of incense and candles. Candles also being because when we first started filming, it was pitch black. And then slowly as the sun comes up. And in this, I am covering my body with oils, which is also used commonly in the rituals. Okay, and then, so I think we can go to the second video, which is a compilation clip of the second film titled Blood Memory. Blood memory is the ancestral ritual of recalling and embodying the memories of your ancestors. And so a lot of the time it's talking about, thinking about traumas of war. Yeah. think we could stop it here, actually.
Yeah, whenever, yeah, I was,
Yeah, I think actually accidentally this was the long version is what I'm
Oh,
realizing.
okay.
But I can switch over to the
Sure,
presentation.
absolutely.
So, okay.
Sorry, it just takes a second to get out of this. Great.
So, yeah, we didn't get to see, I guess, all of the clips, but as you saw, it was a very collaborative piece. I am working with other artists, artist Nicholas O and Antonius Bowie, who are amazing, visual artists, interdisciplinary artists, and dancers, Sohae Kim, who you had seen in the last piece, as well as her partner, Pilgrim Ja. So it was a heavily collaborative piece. And so the piece, because it's about embodying memories of your ancestors, it's all about sort of ancestral connection. And so the way that the film starts, which we didn't see, it's with a ritual that I had performed in front of a pagoda. So a lot of the performances take place in the historical city of Gyeongju in Korea, and it actually was the capital of the ancient kingdoms, sort of during the pre-modern eras. And so it has a lot of archaeological sites, prehistoric sites, and a lot of burials of royalty are there. So in this specific performance, or the image that you see, it's in front of a pagoda that overlooks different burial mounds. And I had set up a small altar with different fruits, foods, and herbs that are sort of an offering and a way to sort of open up the portals for communication. And so close up. Okay. I think you did see this image or this scene. So thinking about embodying and possession. So I was playing with this idea of using traditional masks and wearing them throughout the performance. In this particular location, it is a 3,000-year-old remnant of an old shamanic pagoda. And sort of on top of a mountain. So it was quite arduous to get up there. And I'm wearing these traditional masks that I also paint on my face. So masks, and specifically mask dances in Korean culture, has a lot to do with possession. So the idea is that you put on a mask and you invite a different spirit to sort of inhabit your body, which is very much the structure of the ritual. It's giving your ancestors, you're using sort of your body or a body as a sort of medium to which ancestors can talk about, usually traumatic experiences that they are still healing from and that they need help healing from. And so that was sort of the idea behind the masks. And in these rituals, it is again in a different pagoda. And I had the idea of gathering up all of the foods that was in the ritual, the shrine that you saw in the first slide, and putting them inside of these sort of final bags and burying them into the pagoda as sort of like a final resting space. Okay. And again, you didn't see this, but one of the performances involved a pit fire. So pit fire is the oldest form of firing in ceramics. And so my partner, artist Nicholas O, had pit fired a series of moon jars as part of the performance. Moon jars are a really popular and iconic form of pottery, but it also is sort of emblematic of colonial history because its meaning and its function has been lost. There's a lot of speculation, but there's no real record of how it was used because this was after the occupation and the war. And so all of the original famous moon jars are currently scattered throughout the world, mostly at the British Museum and the Met, which makes sense. And so we reclaimed the moon jar as a sacred vessel and created, using my body and the moon jars together, different shrines and altar spaces. And this is all taking place in Gyeongju. And this is in like remote wood area that we had access to through a friend. Yeah, and so in this performance, which I think was seen in the video, we took an unfired moon jar and we filled it with water, and it slowly disintegrates onto the body. And it's talking again about this idea of disintegration and loss, and thinking about colonial history, and the moon jar being sort of symbolic of it. So in this performance, we are working with Sohei and Pilgyun Jung, and we're back at the DMZ, but this time we're in a sort of more violent area of the DMZ. So these are old water tanks and military bunkers. And I'm not sure if you can see, but there are bullet holes that are kind of all throughout the building. And this specific site actually was it was haunted. It was the site of mass execution for a lot of political prisoners and just people who were held captive during the war. And it's sort of this unmarked grave. And there's a lot of bodies that are still very much unclaimed. So there's this like eerie anonymous idea behind it. And so during the dance, we asked the dancers to work with a sort of just standard mannequin face to talk about the anonymous names. And the dance is a slow unfolding dance that really responds to the energy of the specific site, and thinking about the histories of the war and the ongoing tensions and the separation between the two countries. And also you could see, I guess you could see in the background, Nick and I are also just standing almost kind of like statues on either end, holding the same mask. So we're all wearing the same mask. And so this specific performance takes place at the Farm Colony in Staten Island, which is a very strange location where it used to be this really utopic idea that people would sort of farm and live off of the land. But as history would have it, it became a site of a lot of mass murder and serial killing, and it just turned into this like really horrible crime zone, and then it was shut down and it is now completely abandoned. And so we snuck in the morning and performed these rituals, and it's talking a lot about just drawing from the history of that land and thinking about the people that inhabited the land. And a lot of the research, we read a lot of the different accounts of people who had once lived there, and that is sort of what the dance is really responding to. This was a performance again at Catwalk Institute in upstate New York in Hudson Valley. We built a giant ceramic, I guess like human planter, and plopped it into the river, which was quite an experience. And inside of it, I'm sort of embedding myself and making myself into a small burial mound. And it's again, and my sort of hands are open, and it's sort of a devotional gesture, and it's thinking again about this idea of using my body as a medium for ancestral connection. It's a close-up of the garment that I had discarded right before getting into the human planter. And also, if you could see up close, the sort of way that the sculpture was carved, it's referencing different waters and oceans. And oceans and waters are a common motif in my work. It's sort of symbolic and of this idea of migration and diaspora, because that's another thing I'm reimagining and performing these rituals as a Korean American. And so it's very much through the lens of it, through a diasporic lens. And this was in Kauai, again, with my partner, Nicholas O, where we had sort of created these head pieces using the local plants and flowers that were generously donated to us. And so we were thinking about ways of integrating with like the landscape. And in this performance, it is in the waterfalls. It was at the very end of a very long hike. And Sohei is performing a dance sort of on top of the rocks. Her partner is also inside of the water, but had lost his garment in the middle. And so we had to edit a lot of that out. Yeah, I think we can then move on to the.
And I just want to interject that we have some great comments coming up in the chat with a few questions. And so if people could add more of their questions in the chat, we'll save a few minutes at the end for those.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can go into the next video. So the next video is a clip of the passage, So this all takes place in one location, unlike the other films. It is in a installation that I had built in the studio. And okay. So this performance called The Passage, it is was originally performed live at the Museum of Art and Design and at Christie's as part of an API benefit called At the Table, all in the last 2 months. It is a collaborative piece with myself, Nicholas O, Antonius Bowie, and Sohei, who was also in the Blood Memory film. And so it's talking about, it's reimagining different birthing rituals and thinking about passageways in the womb. And so it takes place in this cave that is made of 500 carved vulvic ceramic tiles. And I'm inside of this latex cocoon with the traditional headdress on top of me. And I'm sort of acting as sort of this vessel out of which Antonius, as you could see, comes out of. And Antonius and Sohei are performing a lot of performances sort of as a duet throughout the performance. Okay, yeah, it gets very visceral. Yeah, and at the end of the performance, we sort of, well, I'm static, and Nicholas and Sohei wrap Antonius back up with the latex and sort of push them back inside of me. So yeah, that is the end.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really happy about this. There's quite a few comments in the chat and some questions that I'd love to have your response to. So
Sure.
I'm gonna, maybe Allison and I can share the back and forth here, but there's one I see here about the Jagori. May asks, usually Chima Jagori made with bright, vivid, vigorous colors, but in your footage, you utilize a white costume instead. What is your intention with the use of the white untraditional color?
So I use a lot of white garments because they are traditionally the color that is used in mourning rituals. And also it's the color that is often used by shamans during the rituals because there is this idea that there's an association with the spiritual realm and the color white.
Yeah, there's been so much love coming. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, but everybody is just, I think, really taken by just all of the images that you've created, both in still form and in the actual videos. Gabriella asked early on, and I'll kind of expand on this. Does most of your inspiration come from your cultural background? What does your process look like when you're coming up with these incredible pieces? And I think that, like, I would also add on to that, like, I'm curious about, like, also your collaborators in that process in terms of like who they are and like what they're bringing to the things, and is it all kind of sort of premeditated in that way, and like, or are there things that you're sort of like letting happen in the space and in time?
Yeah, it's very much a combination. There's a ton of moving parts that go into preparation for a film, preparing garments, and yeah, the collaboration is definitely a major thing, especially because they're not all based in, like, Zoe flew in from Korea. Antonius is an amazing artist that is constantly traveling to various different places. And so it's definitely a lot of years in planning of getting them all kind of to be able to congregate in one space. There is a lot of the performance that is also very much just responding to the space, the weather, the climate that we're in. And so in that way, a lot of the movements are somewhat organic. The dances, for example, are somewhat choreographed and they're rehearsed, but it's always has surprises, wonderful surprises that unfold during filming. And it's very much just them being attuned to each other and attuned to the space. And so I always want to make sure that there is room for that because the whole idea of going to somewhere like, for example, the DMZ, which is this like really wild, haunting, but beautiful place, is that people sort of absorb in those experiences. We did tours because there's a kind of guided tour, not really where we filmed, where they explain a lot more of the history. And so that was also something that I really wanted to have soaked in. And in terms of what the performers bring in, I think we all share an enthusiasm and interest in Korean spiritual practices and ancestral practices. And that is something that I do draw a lot of inspiration from, whether it's reimagined or like reenacting exact movements. And it's thinking about how these rituals, they were a lot of the times performed for specific families. And I've thinking about reimagining them, expanding the idea of family to include community. And so like these are all collaborators that are not family members, but they all kind of share this like interest in spiritual practices. And it's thinking about, and they're all, except for Sohei, thinking about these practices through a diasporic immigrant lens. And so it's how we can all bring in these perspectives and create these movements together. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question here from Cheyenne. In some of your works, you use the concept of gender and femininity. What about that makes it interesting or special to you?
Yeah, gender really plays a big role. So a lot of these rituals are led by female shamans, and it's in a very patriarchal society. That was one place where women had a lot of power and authority, leading these rituals. And that is something that I really thought about when I was making the cave with the 500 vulvic tiles. I was thinking a lot about matrilineage and reclaiming the female power and voice and agency and leading these rituals.
I think some of these questions were happening like while we were watching the video, so they might be going back a little bit.
Yeah.
But, Charity was asking, are these garments traditionally white, and is that choice mostly for symbolism? There was a curiosity there.
Yeah, it was both. They are traditionally white and have a symbolism for loss and mourning.
Mm-hmm. There's a question from Nate here. I noticed your work is built with mostly organic materials. I assume since a lot of inspiration comes from the traditional Korean rites and lore. Do you ever find modern technology as an obstacle to overcome when conveying your work this way, or perhaps something you try to contrast?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a symbiotic relationship because I am working with a lot of organic materials, usually herbs that are used in rituals, or like literally I've taken them from the landscape. But I also, because they're filmed, there's a lot of modern technology that goes into the process that hopefully is seamless. Lighting, we have the cave had like giant LED lights that were like lighting up the whole space, and the performers, we have a fog machine going in parts of the Hudson Valley. We have also just like the equipment that our DP, Mitch Bloomer, our director of photography, uses. And also the way that the films are displayed later, it's usually panoramic. We've explored 2-channel. And so there's different ways that the film is also shown. So it is sort of this strange contrast where a lot of, and also just the editing process. So a lot of the process gets very techy, but the performances are very organic and sort of visceral.
Mm-hmm. We might have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So, Allison, is there one you want to?
Oh, yeah, I guess I was just trying to get to folks that had asked them a while ago. Terry was asking, when creating a piece like Blood Memory, did the process of learning about historical traumas of your ancestors affect your creativity pace due to the potential emotions that it stirred, or did these emotions help aid in your depth of expression? I think, and I would just say, like, I think that we have a number of students that are coming from outside of history of dress as well that are creating work around this topic. And so I think it'd be interesting to kind of think about how that kind of plays into into your work, and then also into the history of this place that you were physically in, which sounds like there's a lot there as well. So
yeah, so I, on a personal sort of autobiographical note, I was thinking about the border as, so my paternal lineage has mostly been lost to North Korea my grandfather had somehow found himself in the South, even with North and South Korea combined. It's not a very large country. And so that idea of separation for decades and decades, what is a story that a lot of families have. And so it's really thinking about that sort of half of my family tree that's been lost that I was personally thinking about. But I also did a lot of research into the DMZ and its history. So for example, the military bunkers and the water tanks were probably the most terrifying and haunting place that we visited. And thinking about, there's a lot of aspects, they are open about it there, but that maybe not are as like, I haven't seen that much like literature or text about specifically the war crimes that occur. And that's something that I think sadly is very relevant today. And thinking about all of just like these bodies that were secretly massacred. And there is a memorial where there are thousands of names of people who had died. But then there's also this other entire body of people, massive people that we don't necessarily know about and that were unclaimed throughout the war. And so that is definitely something that informed the performance. You can't avoid it anyway. And it's definitely why blood memory felt important, because the idea of blood memory is that you're giving space to your ancestors to speak about trauma and experiences that they're not moved on from. So the rituals are both for the like living participant, but it also is a healing space for your ancestors or members of your family who've recently just passed away. And so that is sort of the reason why we went to the DMZ. Yeah.
There's a question here that maybe touches on some of what you were explaining and maybe pushes it a little farther about the passage, the last clip that you showed. Says the imagery of rebirth in the passage is so visceral and impactful. On your website, you said you retained the original dance moves of the original ritual while recontextualizing them to be about rebirth. What was the process of this recontextualization like?
Yeah, so the original ritual called Shikmingut, it's a ritual where you cleanse the bodies of the deceased, and then you soothe the spirits of the deceased and help them pass on to the other realm. And so we were thinking a lot about passageways and portals, and also thinking about the female body, and thinking about also just the politics around the womb and passageways, and thinking of it as something that is being denied a lot of agency these days, but that also has this sacredness to it. And so those were the sort of ways that we were contemporizing this idea.
Thank you. There's a lot of probing questions in the chat that we simply don't have time to get to, but I really appreciate your thoughtful answers. And that's perhaps a really profound moment to take a rest here and let people thank you for your presentation. It's been a real honor for us.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
and I would like to thank you as well, Ayung. I think it's just I think your work just it lives on so many different levels, and we could talk about it for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
But I think specifically, I feel like I got to know your work through the garmenting exhibition, which I would encourage people to check out, because, and I think what is just so in terms of how this kind of talk relates to dress and some of the things that we're thinking about in textile arts is just, I think it really shows like how many different layers of meaning really are embedded in like what we wear. And like we so rarely see like garments embodied in the way that you're working with them and see this kind of time-based effect of them happening. And so it's really lovely. And I think it's going to just really encourage people to expand their thinking about the materials that they use and the way that they're using garments and the context. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, go. You please.
It was lovely, and thank you so much for like allowing me to share the projects. It's still very much like a vulnerable thing because I just finished them. The passage we wrapped like a couple weeks ago after performing them live in multiple iterations. So it's really exciting to, for the first time, really getting to like kind of talk about sort of like the process and ideas.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone who attended today. This conversation will be available later this week on the Textile Arts Event Archive. So check it out. There were a couple people who were asking about that. And then I'm just gonna, I know a lot of people have already left, but I'm just gonna give a shout out for the event that we're doing tomorrow. Our textile arts artists in residence, Anne Greenwood, Lila Rowan, and Lou Bain are hosting a panel discussion about TC2 weaving in conjunction with Portland Textile Month, and that'll be happening at noon. So hope you can join us. Ayung, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we hope that you can come back, maybe hopefully in person someday. So
yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Good luck with your upcoming opening. Yes.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.